Hey guys, Darren Carr here, coach of Wise Ocean Pods, and welcome back to the third edition of our club preview series. Today we are talking about the Carlton Blues. Let's get into it.
All the pain.
We are the Navy Blues. We are the old dark Navy Blues.
That's enough of that. So on today's episode, we are talking about the Navy Blues. Which surprisingly for me, when I looked at their team list, I was like, oh, I'm not really seeing too much difference here. But when I started getting into the data a little bit, there are potentially quite a few players that I am interested in this preseason. So let's get into them a little bit. But before we get into the players, let's just quickly talk about Carlton as a whole. So Carlton finished 8th in 2024, where they just scraped into the 8th and didn't really make too much of an impact in finals, where they did get beaten by the Brisbane Lions in the elimination final. Where I expect them to finish this year, I probably expect them to make a little bit more of a jump. Again, probably top 6 now. They do have a fairly easy draw, which is going to be quite juicy for us as fantasy coaches. So in terms of just playing easier teams, they're going to have a fairer draw. However, they don't have the opening round bye, which is perfect. If we're looking at primos, then that makes it much more easier for us to make a decision because we're not having to play through those early season buys. They only have round 12 bye, and they also have the easiest team on the calendar in the Tigers in round 1, so that could also get your season off to a huge start. So all those things you got to weigh up when you're looking at these sort of players. In terms of their trade-ins and trade-outs, they didn't really trade anyone in. They literally had no one. They only traded out Matt Kennedy, so he went to the Western Bulldogs, so that probably frees up a little bit of CBAs, which I'll get into a little bit later. Jack Martin was a delisted free agent, I believe, and Matt Owens was also traded to West Coast Eagles. So 3 sort of players that they were relying on last year are no longer playing with them, so that's going to shuffle their team around a little bit. And they also delisted 4 other players, including Marchbank, who's probably the most notable out of those guys. So, a few changes. So, definitely going to make some influences on what they do. So, they also headed to the draft with pick number 3 and also 38 and 6 in a couple in the 60s. But their main selection that they picked up was Jagger Smith, who obviously, being pick 3, is going to probably get a bit of a run at the AFL. So big expectations on him to make an impact on the Carlton Blues and also in our fantasy teams. But let's get into the players who are on my watch list. So looking at the best 22, probably already just spot out a few. Nick Newman is obviously going to be one that we speak about. Nick Haynes, I spoke about him a little bit in the trade period video, but he's also one I'm watching. Adam Chera, for a lot of different reasons, he had a pretty injury-ridden year last year, and his average is way down, so I probably could expect him to jump back up. I'll get into the details of that when I go to him. Sam Doherty, he missed out majority of last season with an ACL injury, so he is heavily discounted. And we've also got the likes of Tom de Koning, our first ruckman of the series that we need to speak about. So he could make a big inclusion if he gets this solo ruck role. And then finally, I'll just do Sam Walsh as well because he is a top 8 midfielder ranked. So he is one that we need to speak about. Obviously Jagger Smith as well. But everyone else, not really too keen on at this point. But that's a fair bit of chunk of their team. So let's get into them now. So Sam Walsh will start up top. He is priced at 106.1, so just under $1.1 million. Like I said, he is ranked 8th in terms of midfielders, and he's ranked number 15 in the overall fantasy score. So he is way up there. You sort of know what you're going to get with Sam Walsh. He is a super accumulator of the ball. Pretty much runs the the Carlton Blues midfield, being the number one man in there, but alongside Paddy Cripps. He did increase his average from a 94.6 last season, so he did make that leap after having a bit of a slower start where he was out he was out the side for a period of time with I think it was a back injury that they said. So it was good to see him back and fit and firing. The problem with Sam Walsh, I guess, is we're looking for value, right? And you probably can't look at these numbers and say that he is exactly value. His highest season he's ever scored was, he's averaged as 109. So, that's 3 points of value that you could say if he matches his best. The thing that I am interested in with Sam Walsh is the fact that the Carlton Blues don't have the opening round. They have a really good fixture. If I just read out their fixture, who they're playing for the first sort of 5 weeks, they go Tigers first week, Hawks week 2, Western Bulldogs week 3, Pies, and then the Eagles as well. And that's followed by North, Cats, and Crows. So a bit of an extended list there, but they do have a fairly good run to start the season. Not having opening round bye, so you're not having to worry about any of those early round buys. And then they have around 12 bye there as well. So it's a big consideration, but he could definitely be a pretty good captain option and get your season off to a flyer. So that's why I'm quite interested in him. I expect he's going to be part of that top 8 midfielders again. I'll get into my rankings in a later video probably when we start talking about defenders and midfielders and ruckman as a whole, not just as a club preview. So stay tuned for that. But yeah, I expect him is going to be there or thereabouts. So we have to talk about him. And yeah, he's obviously a gun of the competition. So definitely one that you want to see. If he's fit and firing, if he's able to take his game or showing signs that he's going to take his game to the next level, then he is definitely one that we got to consider. The next one, very similar, is Nick Newman. He was ranked number 6th for defenders. So he was a part of that top 6 defender status all last season. He's priced at 102.6. I had a mega year, which probably went underrated a little bit in my view. Not many people had him until it was like sort of the back end of the season. He can put up some massive scores, 152, 164 in his last 2. Ranked 23rd overall in fantasy scores, so he is just an accumulator. There is talks that he is actually going to be playing a little bit more midfield time. I'm not 100% sure if that's true as such. I do think he's preferred to be that distributor, but with a few other guys out there sort of brought into the side, maybe he gets pushed up the wing a little bit. Maybe a Doherty sort of slots back into the halfback role a little bit more. We know how good he has been for them in the past, 5-6 years. So I expect him to stay in this halfback role and probably stay pretty consistent in terms of what he's been able to score. Again, he's part of the top 6, so he's something that we need to talk about. He's one that year either, if you're not starting with him, you probably got to plan around when you're going to pick him up, whether that's by the mid-season buys or, whether he drops in value a little bit, has a slower start. And then you can really look at him in terms of picking up when he's cheap. So all these things you really got to consider. The other thing is that he's just a pure defender. He is not going to be eligible for DPP at this point in time. So big watch on him. Tom De Koning is the next one. Find the name. And he's the first ruckman that we need to talk about in this series because he 100% provides some value if, as I say, he plays this solo ruck role. So he's priced at 87.7 or 87.8, however way you want to look at it. He is priced at exactly 900k. So he's not costing a huge amount, but he is still quite expensive. But what he has been able to show when he is the number 1 ruck, not playing along Pitnet, he has been able to average massively. So I did this stat crunching, and when he was their solo ruck, Pitnet was not in the side at all. He played 90% sort of ruck time, which I can sort of show you here. There was an extended period of time from like round 1 to 4, 4, 11 through to 15, and then also 17 to 19. Those are the stats I've taken. He averaged 102.6 over those 9 games. I think I didn't include the round 19 because he was injured partway through that game where he only scored a 61. So did bump up the numbers a little bit. Either way, he was well into the 90s with if you include that one. But that is quite a massive improvement. Obviously, 15 points value. If he gets the role, it's just a huge risk with Pitnet still on this team. He's not delisted. As you can see, he's still waiting in the wings. And Carlton have not been afraid to, when things are getting tough, they just throw Pitnet in there just to even up the score a little bit. A lot of teams are now running running a dual ruck system. So when they come up against a team like that, do they just throw Pitnet in there just to ease a load onto Koning? He's still quite young, so I can still see that potentially happening this season. But it's a huge watch for me in this preseason. If news comes out that Tom de Koning is the preference and that they're going to be trying him majority of the season with being him the main ruck and him managing his load, then absolutely he is one that I'll be considering to slot into probably my R2 spot. We'll just have to wait and see with what happens with more cheaper options with rucks. I'm not seeing a huge amount at this point in time, so we're definitely scrambling for a little bit of a our ruckman spot. So, but de Koning absolutely is one that you need to be putting on your list and keeping a close eye on, because he could be massive for you and could potentially push that top two ruckman. If not, he'll be around that sort of mark if he gets the role. Adam Chera is the next one that I want to talk about, and for the reasons I said off the top, he had a pretty bad season overall. He was injury ridden for a fair bit of it, and as a result, he is now priced 20-ish points below where he's averaged in his last couple of seasons. So he's priced at 72.6, which is about 750k, and he has averaged 96.6 previously, 88 in his past 2 seasons. So he is well down from his average there. So what can he do in 2025? Does he get rid of a role boost with the likes of Matt Kennedy being traded out to Western Bulldogs, who obviously took a fair bit of the CBAs there? I can even show you that here. So throughout the season, it was very up and down for Matt Kennedy, but during pretty big periods, he had 70%. Whether that was strategic or that was just them fitting in the player, who knows? But that frees up a fair bit of time for the likes of Chera, or who we'll get into a little bit later, Jagger Smith, to slot straight into that role. What role he's going to play? But there's definitely some numbers that are available for the likes of these players. So Adam Chera sort of started pretty well with his CBA numbers, sort of being in that 70 range. Had an extended period with injury or suspension. I don't exactly remember, but he missed very big periods of the game. But towards the back end of the season, and this is where my concern sort of starts, is that his CBA numbers dropped off quite dramatically, where he was up at 70% and then it dropped down to even 0% or, very, very low. So is that something that we're going to expect? Even in the elimination final, he only had 44%. And they had a pretty injury-riddled team at that point as well. So that is pretty concerning, especially when, they pretty much went for a tighter midfield at that point, where it was just the main three with Sam Walsh, Hewitt, and Cripps. And then Chera looked like he was that fourth midfielder. So if he's going to be that fourth guy now on, I think I would classify him, he was the fifth guy before last year, where Matt Kennedy was sort of that fourth. Now he's probably bumped up to that fourth guy, so he definitely could increase his average next season. It's just we need to get more confirmation. Obviously, with Jagger Smith coming in, do they prefer to go with him? Does Chera... Sorry, I'm about to sneeze. Does Jagger Smith take that role and become that fourth midfielder? Do they throw him in the deep end and just see what his talent can provide? Because he is going to be an elite footballer at his top. So he is definitely one that you want to keep an eye on. Well, yeah, Adam Chera provides plenty of value. It's just whether you want to start him. He is only midfielder only. It is a bit of a risk because he could, stay on the wing that he's been playing on for the last little bit. He also played a little bit down back last year, so his role was a bit up in the air. But I'm very keen to see what the shuffles are going to be like at the Carlton Blues. Next person, someone that we need to massively talk about because he has been a fantasy gun for us for many, many years, and that is Sam Doherty. He had a very, very injury riddled season last year where obviously he played one game opening round, and then he had the ACL injury which saw him out for the remainder of the season until we came back for finals. Now he is priced down at 76.3 with his 27 point discount that he got off that. If you look at his scores last season, they're not the greatest, but they're also not the worst when I look at it. So if we go to Sam Doherty here, he scored a 48 in opening round when he first had his ACL. That was off less than 50% game time. I think it was exactly a half time where he got subbed out. So if you double that, in theory, that's pretty much 100. Not saying that he's going to average 100, but that's exactly what he has done in the past. And then if you look at his elimination final where they got sort of pumped, he had 75% game time and he scored a 67. So not the greatest thing to be coming off of, but definitely is a decent sign that he probably was underdone, having a little bit longer game time than what he is used to. So I'm expecting with a full preseason, fit and firing, that he can be a fantasy gun for us and provide us plenty of value. However, he is no longer a defender. He is a pure midfielder, so he will be clogging up a midfield spot for you. Um, Probably a conversation around what role he plays. I probably expect him to play this halfback wing role, which we've seen him in the past do. So expect him to float back, get those plus sixes that he loves to do, and be that sort of distributing halfbacker, which we have all seen before. Just looking at his numbers from the past, he has obviously finished top out as our top defender in terms of scoring at 110 average back in 2022, and he also finished at 104.5 last year. So also 2023. So there's no undoubtedly he is a lot of value. But if you just go back at base of that calculation, he is 30 points undervalued where he finished in the previous season. So that's massive. It's just whether you want to pay for him. He is now 31. Do you think he has the right role? In his time that he's been injured, we've seen the likes of Nick Newman really rise in terms of what he's been able to output. Even if we go back to the 2023 sort of scoring distribution here, he obviously finished number one for the side. But if you look towards the back end of the season, you can sort of see where the scores sort of started to drop off, probably from around 18 onwards. And that's sort of when Nick Newman sort of picked up a little bit. He had that massive period where he just went absolutely ballistic. So there's probably a little bit of questions around how they sort of work together and they can both work along side by side. But either way, I'm very confident that a Sam Doherty will increase his average from a 76 to probably a 90 at a minimum. I would be very surprised if it's anything under 90 throughout the entire period, and he's one that I'm absolutely looking at starting. Given their run, given that they don't have the opening round bye, just all these sort of factors just sort of lines up that he is one that we absolutely want to consider, and he is currently in my side. Next one I already spoke about a little bit in the trade video, was Nick Haynes. Now, Nick Haynes obviously was traded from GWS after sort of falling out of favour with GWS there. He is priced down at 67 after only playing 8 games last year. So that's priced him about under 700k. So he is quite cheap for what he's been able to do. He hasn't been a super fantasy scorer in the past, especially probably the last sort of 4 or 5 years. His best season average was in the 80s. So at most, he's probably 13 points of value if you can get back to his best. It's just that the fact that he is probably going to be best 22. Like if you look at that back at that best 22, which again the AFL are producing, he slots straight back into that second tool or third tool if you want to look at it, alongside Wiedering and McGovern there. So expect him to definitely play a fair bit, and he is a very good interceptor. So it's just whether he can take some points off Mitch McGovern, who has typically been their third man up and been that intercepting mark. So that's probably some of the concerns around me with picking Nick Haynes. I do think Mitch McGovern will continue that role and be that main intercept defender. So he's probably not going to get as much of the appeal that we have seen when he at his time with the GWS there. So, but if I see something that I'm like, if he's going to take some kick-ins, if he's going to get any sort of points upgrade, then he is definitely one that we could slot into our defense line. And then to finish off the video, to make this one pretty quick, we got Jagger Smith. Without a doubt, I think everyone's sort of looking at this kid. He is an absolute gun. If we could have a quick look at his VFL numbers, he had played 2 games last year. Wasn't the heights that we sort of expected, I guess. He averaged a little over 70 in across those 2 games, scoring 80 and 61. But if you look at the consistencies across his scoreline, it was pretty much all disposals. He had really no tackles and no marks. So he is a very highly disposal player, very similar to a Sam Walsh, where they don't really do too much else besides get disposals and get in and under. Maybe even probably consider him more of a Tom Mitchell sort of player, which we know what Tom Mitchell's been able to do in his past. So not saying that Jagger Smith is going to be a pig one day, but all the signs are there that this kid could be anything. So he is priced at 334k, so he's going to be one of the more expensive rookies that year you got to start with, but I think the numbers are there that you have to start with him. If we go to his under 18 numbers, just have a look at these. So he played for Vic Metro, and he averaged 115 last year across, 4 games in the under 18 championships. And then if you go to the Talent League as well, I can scroll. He averaged 114 across 12 games. So he is massive. He knows how to get the ball. He knows how to play. He knows how to rack up the pill and knows how to be very good fantasy scores for us. It's just whether he's going to play in the side, which being pick 3, Carlton traded up for him. They're really keen on him. So absolutely, I expect him to be thrown in the deep end and be thrown in some sort of midfield role. I don't expect that to be like a 50% role. I expect it to probably be this 20 to 30% here and there, and maybe he floats forward, maybe he does a bit of defense work. It'll be interesting to see how that goes, but I definitely expect him to be playing pretty much every single game for the Carlton Blues, being such a high pick. So I absolutely expect him to play, and for that reason, he slots straight into my side this season. But big watch on what happens. But yeah, that's pretty much all I really had to say about this team. There's a lot of numbers that we got to consider, and a lot of different movements with a lot of the off-season trade period that had happened, and all the value that these guys are presenting after having a lot of injuries internally for the Carlton Blues. Realistically, looking at half their list, you look at the back end of the last season, majority of their team was out injured. So there's probably an argument for a lot of these guys to be, they had an injury-ridden season and they probably are a bit undervalued. But I've just targeted the main ones that I think are the most relevant. I didn't even talk about Patrick Cripps, obviously the captain. George Hewitt could get a bump as well after, a Matt Kennedy sort of dropped out. He had a couple bad games. Mitch McGovern, does he improve with the luck of Nick Haynes probably taking that second tall defender role? Could he play a very James Sicily sort of role and score well for us potentially? But these are all the things that we gotta weigh up and what we gotta look at in preseason when we start to see some track watches and news starts to come out with how they're sort of tracking, and obviously we'll get into the practice games and the match sims and stuff like that. So there's a lot to be going on, but these are just some of the main guys that I wanted to put on your radar to really start focusing on and start putting some numbers alongside. So that'll be it for today, guys. I will catch you guys in the next one. Peace.